The chill of the early morning air nipped at Jon Stewart's skin as he approached the crowded auction block. The sounds of bustling voices and hooves on wood echoed around him, a cacophony that only heightened his unease. The smell of sweat, hay, and dust mingled with the sharper scent of animal fear, creating an atmosphere thick with tension. Horses neighed in protest as they were paraded before potential buyers, each creature trying to grasp its fate amidst the chaos. Jon's eyes narrowed as he scanned the lines of horses being led in front of a throng of eager bidders. He recognized several faces among them, fellow ranchers with hard expressions etched into their sun-weathered features. And a knot tightened in his stomach at the sight. The Broken Arrow Ranch had fallen on tough times lately, and everyone was looking for some way to make a profit or cut their losses. Amongst the throng, his gaze landed on an elegant stallion, a deep chestnut with a mane that flowed like silk and intelligent eyes that seemed to search for understanding amidst the clamor. There was something about this horse that drew Jon's attention. It possessed an undeniable spirit that set it apart from others locked away in pens nearby. As it shifted nervously, Jon could sense its anxiety. This creature knew it was in peril. "Lot number 42, boomed the auctioneer's voice, cutting through Jon's thoughts like a knife through flesh. "Step right up. A fine specimen indeed. This stallion has bloodlines to be reckoned with." Men began shouting bids over one another as Jon edged closer, feeling an invisible tether pulling him toward the stallion. He could see how other bidders fidgeted impatiently. Many were hardened men who saw horses merely as commodities, tools for labor or trophies for status, rather than living beings deserving compassion. "No!" shouted a voice behind him. Dalton Reed's resonant growl reverberated across the platform like thunder rolling over mountains. "He's not worth what you're offering." Jon turned slightly to catch Dalton's eye just as he barked orders at his ranch hands, who were carrying out their tasks under duress while casting anxious glances towards the auction block. Jon clenched his fists instinctively. He had come here under strict orders from Dalton to offload unwanted stock, not engage emotionally with any horse. But watching Lot 42 being driven forward against its will made something inside him stir uncomfortably. Going once, going twice. The frantic bidding continued until finally, "Sold!" A thunderous clap signaled another soul snatched from safety into uncertainty. The crowd erupted into cheers and jeers alike, while Jon's heart sank deeper into his chest. Someone else would take ownership now, their care perhaps more selfish than considerate. He took an involuntary step backward, but found himself rooted to the spot when he noticed an all-too-familiar face among those approaching. Lot 42. Ezekiel Thornton himself, the owner of Broken Arrow Ranch, stood amongst other wealthy cattlemen scoping out new prospects for profit. The air was thick with tension as Jon stood rooted to the spot, a storm of emotions swirling within him. The cold wind bit at his cheeks, but it wasn't the chill that made him shiver. It was the pit in his stomach, heavy with dread. Lot 42, a young stallion, was being driven forward into the spotlight of the auction block, its eyes wide and frantic as it struggled against the pull of the handlers. Around him, wealthy cattlemen loomed like hawks circling their prey, their voices rising and falling like waves crashing against the shore. Each bid echoed through Jon's mind like a drumbeat of inevitability. Going once, going twice. The words hung in the air, thick with finality. Jon's heart sank deeper with every passing moment. He could see fear etched across Lot 42's face, a mirror to what he felt inside. It was an all-too-familiar sensation, helplessness mixed with determination, battling for dominance within him. There had been countless moments when he'd witnessed animals being reduced to mere commodities in this unforgiving world of ranching. But today felt different. Today hit harder. "Sold!" A thunderous clap broke through his reverie, and Jon clenched his fists at his sides. Just like that, Another horse was yanked from safety into uncertainty, its fate now resting in hands that may not understand or care for its spirit or needs. He took a step back instinctively, but froze as a shadow fell over him. Ezekiel Thornton had arrived among a group of cattlemen inspecting their new acquisitions for profit potential. His presence sent an involuntary jolt through Jon. This man represented everything he detested about this business: ruthless efficiency, devoid of empathy. Thornton's calculating gaze roamed over Lot 42 as if assessing an investment rather than a living creature capable of emotion and pain. Jon held his breath, unable to tear himself away from watching while he fought against feelings of inadequacy swelling within him. The recognition that here stood one more soul on the brink of suffering because someone viewed them merely as numbers on a ledger. "You've got good stock here," Thornton remarked to another rancher standing beside him, nodding toward Lot 42 being pulled further up toward the front line where bids would be placed without hesitation or second thoughts. "Looks promising," came the reply without enthusiasm. Jon's chest tightened at those words. Promising? The stallion didn't need promises. It needed kindness and understanding. He could sense its desperation even from afar. It longed for something deeper than monetary gain. It craved compassion in a world too often built upon exploitation. As Thornton spoke again about price estimates and breeding potentials undercut by market trends, something ignited inside Jon, an urge so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. But how could he act? How could he stand up against such formidable forces alone? The air was thick with tension as Jon Stewart stood among the throng of cattlemen and ranch hands, his heart pounding in his chest like a wild stallion. Lot 42, the horse he had felt an unshakable connection to just moments before, was being led further away from safety. The sound of hooves against dirt and the murmurs of excited bidders rang in his ears like an ominous warning. Going once, going twice. The auctioneer's voice pierced through the murmur of conversation, a stark reminder that time was slipping away. Each call for bids felt like a lash across Jon's resolve. He clenched his fists at his sides, feeling helpless as he watched the stallion being shoved forward by indifferent hands. It struggled momentarily before falling into line behind others who were equally resigned to their fate. Thornton loomed nearby, discussing price points with other wealthy ranchers. "Looks promising," he said casually, assessing Lot 42 with an appraising eye. It was clear this horse needed more than just a financial appraisal. It craved understanding and compassion in a world all too ready to discard it for profit. As Thornton continued outlining breeding potential and market trends without any hint of empathy, an ember ignited within Jon, a fierce urge to act that surged through him like wildfire. But how could one man stand against such towering giants of industry alone? His heart raced as he grappled with himself, the impulse to intervene battling against the paralyzing fear of rejection or worse, punishment. He took a hesitant step forward, but hesitated when he realized everyone around him was consumed by their own ambitions. A flicker of doubt nagged at him. Would anyone support him if he dared to speak up? Would they even care enough about Lot 42's plight? He glanced back at the stallion, whose intelligent eyes seemed to search for hope amid despair. "I can't let this happen," he muttered under his breath, fingers twitching anxiously at his sides. With each second ticking away on the auctioneer's gavel and every cheer echoing from spectators eager for new livestock, something deep within him made its choice. Taking a deep breath filled with resolve, Jon pushed through the crowd toward where Lot 42 stood, trembling beneath pressure from unseen forces urging it forward into uncertainty, an unwilling participant in its own sale. "Hey!" His voice boomed louder than he'd intended as surprise rippled through those near him. Conversations halted briefly. Curious eyes turned toward him as whispers spread through the gathering, a ripple effect sparked by one man daring to challenge conformity. "Stop! This horse is worth more than your bids!" The words spilled out before he could stop them. There was no turning back now. Jon's heart raced as he stood there, a whirlwind of emotions churning within him. The chatter of the crowd faded to a dull roar, replaced by the steady thrum of his pulse. He could feel eyes on him, curiosity mixed with confusion as he stepped closer to Lot 42. The stallion stood trembling in its pen, its dark coat glistening under the harsh lights like a polished stone, but it was the fear in its wide eyes that pierced Jon deeply. "Stop! This horse is worth more than your bids!" Jon's voice cut through the noise like a knife. It was louder than he had intended, yet somehow it felt right, urgent and necessary. Gasps rippled through the crowd, heads turned sharply, and whispers floated like leaves caught in an autumn breeze. The stallion shifted uneasily beneath Jon's gaze, sensing both his presence and his passion. There was a silent plea in those dark eyes, an echo of the same desperation Jon had seen before when he rescued that horse from the creek just days earlier. Memories flooded back, the cold water lapping at their legs in that shared moment of survival. And he couldn't bear to think of another creature being reduced to nothing more than a price tag. As murmurs swelled around him, Jon pressed on, fueled by something deep within. This isn't just another transaction. This is about compassion. This horse deserves care and respect, not just to be sold off without thought. A heavy silence settled over them. For a fleeting second, even the auctioneer hesitated, taken aback by this unexpected outburst from one man standing against a tide of indifference. Thornton's brow furrowed as he absorbed Jon's words, disbelief mingled with irritation on his face. "What are you talking about?" "This is how things work here," Thornton replied coolly, waving dismissively toward Lot 42, as if summoning it for sale rather than recognizing its individuality. Jon took a step forward. Determination blazed brightly inside him, despite the mounting tension. "No, it shouldn't work this way," he insisted vehemently. "These animals aren't mere commodities. They're living beings with emotions." His heart pounded harder now as frustration danced dangerously close to anger within him. He turned back toward Lot 42 again, a magnificent stallion whose spirit shone bright even amid uncertainty, and saw not just an animal, but a kindred soul yearning for understanding amid callousness. The crowd remained still and watchful. Some exchanged uneasy glances, while others appeared intrigued by this bold confrontation unfolding before them. "Look at him," Jon urged passionately, gesturing toward Lot 42's quivering frame as if trying to illuminate the hidden depths beneath its outward fearfulness. "He has more potential than you realize. More strength. Look at how beautifully built he is." The stallion shifted anxiously from foot to foot, but raised its head slightly higher as if sensing hope rekindling around it through Jon's fervent pleas, a flicker igniting deep within its spirit once threatened by despair alone. With the crowd's murmurs echoing in his ears, Jon stepped closer to Lot 42, the magnificent stallion whose spirit shone like a beacon even amidst the chaos of the auction. The horse shifted nervously on its hooves, clearly uncomfortable under the scrutiny of eager bidders and spectators alike. "Stop! This horse is worth more than your bids!" The urgency in Jon's voice sliced through the air, drawing startled glances from those around him. Conversations halted, and whispers rippled through the gathering like an electric charge. Eyes turned toward him with curiosity as he stood firm before Lot 42. His heart raced as he continued. "Look at him!" He gestured passionately towards the stallion's sleek form, emphasizing every muscle that rippled beneath its dark coat. "He has so much potential, more strength than you realize." The stallion trembled slightly, but raised its head ever so slightly, as if sensing a flicker of hope igniting within it, a spark that had been dimmed by uncertainty and fear. Jon saw not just an animal, but a kindred spirit yearning for recognition amid harsh treatment. The crowd remained tense, yet transfixed. Some exchanged uneasy glances while others leaned in closer, intrigued by this unexpected confrontation unfolding before them. Jon could sense their skepticism, but refused to waver. "You have no idea what this horse can do," he implored with fervor. "Just look at his eyes. There's intelligence there, a fire waiting to be unleashed." His words echoed out across the crowd like a rallying cry, drawing attention away from profit margins and misplaced judgments. With each word spoken, Jon could feel the energy shift around him. It was as if time slowed. Tension crackled in the atmosphere while everyone held their breath, caught up in his passionate defense of Lot 42's worth. He took a step forward, closing the distance between himself and the stallion, who now seemed to lean into him ever so slightly. A subtle acknowledgement that perhaps someone understood. "Let me show you what he's capable of," Jon declared boldly as he moved toward Lot 42 with intent. Every eye in attendance watched closely. Anticipation hung thick in the air like fog on an early morning trail ride. Gently reaching out his hand toward the stallion's face, Jon offered it slowly, giving it space to decide whether or not it would accept his touch. The stallion hesitated for only a heartbeat before leaning into his palm with cautious trust. An exhilarating rush surged through Jon's veins at this first contact. A fleeting connection forged between man and beast, marked by uncertainty, yet charged with possibility. "See?" he called back over his shoulder to where attendees stood frozen in disbelief. "This isn't just any horse. It's more than that. It's about partnership." The crowd appeared rapt. They were beginning to see beyond mere transaction value into something deeper, a bond waiting to be nurtured rather than exploited. The stallion's frame quivered slightly. Yet beneath the tension, there was a flicker of curiosity in its eyes. Jon stood close, his breath steadying as he studied the animal before him. The crowd around them remained silent, entranced by the unexpected connection unfolding between man and beast. This was more than just an auction. It felt like a pivotal moment that could alter both their destinies. "Look at him!" Jon's voice cut through the stillness with passion. He gestured to Lot 42's poised figure, each line of muscle taut and ready beneath its glossy coat. "This isn't merely about purchasing a horse. It's about recognizing potential. Can't you see? There's strength within him that you've overlooked." The stallion shifted uneasily from one hoof to another, but something in Jon's tone seemed to resonate deep within it. Its head lifted ever so slightly, as though sensing hope rekindling around it. A spark ignited amid despair. Jon took a step forward, heart pounding with anticipation. With slow determination, he extended his hand toward the stallion's face, an open invitation rather than an intrusion. He allowed space for the animal to make its own choice while holding his breath in suspense. For what felt like an eternity, the stallion hesitated, but then, slowly and cautiously, it leaned into Jon's palm. A rush of exhilaration coursed through Jon at this first exchange of trust, an ephemeral connection blossoming between them that pulsed with possibility amidst uncertainty. "See?" Jon called out again over his shoulder toward the onlookers who watched wide-eyed as if witnessing magic unfold before them. "This is not just any horse. We're talking about partnership here." Their expressions shifted, skepticism transformed into intrigue as they began to grasp the deeper meaning behind his words, the chance to nurture rather than exploit. Feeling emboldened by this acceptance from Lot 42, Jon lowered himself down closer to meet its gaze. "I know you've been through so much," he murmured softly, eyes locked onto those intelligent orbs filled with untamed spirit. "But together, we can turn your past into our future." As he spoke gently, soothingly caressing along the stallion's neck and shoulders where muscles tensed under fear and apprehension still loomed like shadows from previous experiences, It leaned further into his touch, a silent affirmation, igniting joy within Jon's chest. Around them hovered whispers and gasps as spectators saw what had begun, a budding bond fueled by compassion instead of demand, an understanding transcending mere human language built upon shared moments that would echo long after their paths intertwined. Jon continued speaking softly, while also allowing silence moments for Lot 42 to acclimate, letting patience weave its way into their interaction like threads forming an unbreakable fabric, binding them together gradually, layer by layer. The ground beneath felt solid, yet shifting all at once, the atmosphere charged with latent energy mirrored only by every heartbeat exchanged between man and horse. Jon's heart raced as he observed the crowd before him, a sea of eager faces interspersed with skepticism. The sun cast warm rays over the gathering, illuminating the dust swirling in the air like whispers of old tales waiting to be told. He took a deep breath, steadying himself while maintaining gentle eye contact with the stallion. Lot 42. There was something magnetic about their connection, a thread woven from compassion and trust that neither wanted to sever. "Look at this," Jon urged, gesturing toward the stallion as it leaned into his palm. "This isn't just any horse. It's about forming a partnership." A flicker of intrigue danced in some eyes, but among them lurked lingering doubts, those who had seen too many horses succumb to harsh treatment and indifference. The murmurs began, a low rumble of discontent echoing through the crowd like distant thunder. "Can one act of kindness really change anything?" someone muttered. Another voice chimed in, filled with doubt. "It's just a horse. You can't expect it to understand loyalty or compassion." Jon's chest tightened at their words, feeling the weight of every skeptical glance like chains binding him down. But Lot 42 remained unflinching beside him, its dark eyes reflecting an intelligence that seemed to challenge those very thoughts. It was as if the stallion sensed Jon's apprehension and decided then and there to prove them wrong. He spoke again, this time more passionately. "Trust is built slowly. It's not given freely on command." As he continued sharing stories about horses saved from neglect and abuse through empathy rather than domination, Jon noticed small nods in response from some attendees who had begun leaning forward slightly, a hint that they were intrigued despite their misgivings. Suddenly, an older man pushed his way through the throng, his weather-beaten face set in lines of skepticism, etched deeper by years spent managing ranches where hard work overshadowed sensitivity. "What makes you think this one will be different?" he challenged sharply. "I've seen men like you come and go." Jon felt anger simmer beneath his skin, but held it back. Fury would do little against entrenched beliefs shaped by years of harsh realities. Instead, he kept his tone measured yet assertive. "Because I believe we can change how we treat these animals, and perhaps they'll surprise us." As if on cue, Lot 42 shifted its weight confidently and stepped closer to Jon's side, a silent declaration that resonated within him like a heartbeat shared between partners. The stallion turned its head slightly towards Jon before gazing out across the crowd with a boldness that suggested defiance against doubters. "I don't expect miracles," Jon admitted honestly after pausing for effect while gauging reactions from both supporters and skeptics alike. The silence gripping everyone tightly now as curiosity hung thick like fog around them all. "But I do believe it starts here." As the sun rose over Broken Arrow Ranch, its rays broke through the heavy clouds, illuminating a scene of newfound possibilities. Jon Stewart stood in the training pen, every muscle in his body coiled with anticipation as he prepared to work with Lot 42. The stallion's dark coat gleamed under the gentle morning light, its intelligent eyes reflecting curiosity and determination. The air was crisp and filled with the sounds of nature waking up, birds chirping in the distance, wind rustling through the grass, and the faint clatter of hooves against wood as Jon approached. There was an electric energy surrounding them. This wasn't just about training. It was about forging a bond built on trust and respect. "All right, Lot 42, Jon said softly, his voice steady yet encouraging. "Today, we start something new together." He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of expectation from both himself and those who had gathered to witness this momentous occasion. Each step felt heavier as he moved closer to the stallion, heart racing at what lay ahead. Lot 42 shifted nervously, but didn't retreat. Instead, it seemed to stand its ground, a sign that perhaps today would be different than previous experiences for both horse and man. Jon took this as a good omen. Jon reached out tentatively with one hand extended palm upward. A blend of anxiety and hope coursed through him. Could they truly create something special? With each passing heartbeat echoing in his ears, he concentrated on establishing that connection first before attempting anything else. Slowly but surely, Lot 42 began to inch forward cautiously until their noses almost touched, a silent exchange fraught with meaning. The crowd watched intently. Hushed whispers filled the air like an incantation, spellbinding all present. "That's it," Jon murmured softly as he brushed his fingertips along Lot 42's muzzle. The warmth radiating from its skin felt grounding amidst swirling emotions within himself. Their gaze locked momentarily. Two beings trying desperately to understand one another beyond mere instincts. He felt his confidence swell as he continued speaking calmly while observing how Lot 42 responded, noticing subtle shifts in posture or breathing patterns, as if each movement spoke volumes about past encounters shaped by fear or mistrust rather than cooperation. With patience woven into every word spoken aloud between them came moments of silence where understanding flourished alongside uncertainty still lingering around them like shadows cast long upon fragile beginnings. A dance composed not only by hope, but also hesitation threading throughout their interaction today. "I know you've been through so much," Jon acknowledged gently after allowing another pause filled purely by shared breaths exchanged back and forth, the pulse quickening underneath skin, connecting them anew again. Now even amid unspoken burdens carried silently yet palpably between horseman and horse alike. But together, they could change things for both their sakes. Jon stood in the barn, surrounded by the soft sounds of breathing horses and the rustle of straw beneath their hooves. The air was thick with a sense of anticipation, yet tension hung heavy, as if everyone could feel the weight of unspoken doubts swirling around them like autumn leaves caught in a gust. He glanced over at Lot 42, who was comfortably nestled in his stall, but the stallion's demeanor seemed to suggest an underlying unease. Despite Jon's efforts to establish a new way of working with the animals, a partnership founded on trust and understanding, he sensed that not everyone shared his vision. Some ranch hands still eyed him with skepticism. They were accustomed to strict methods governed by fear rather than compassion. Their reluctance manifested in silent exchanges and wary glances whenever he approached. "I know you've been through so much," Jon said softly to Lot 42, his voice barely above a whisper but full of conviction. He reached out slowly, letting the horse get used to his presence again before grazing his fingers along its warm neck. This stallion had endured pain and uncertainty. Now it needed reassurance that it was safe here. As if sensing Jon's need for connection, Lot 42 moved closer, resting its muzzle against Jon's shoulder. There was something profoundly grounding about this moment. It felt like they were both drawing strength from each other amid an environment filled with doubt. Yet as he savored this bond, Jon couldn't ignore the persistent anxiety building within him. "What will happen when we work together?" he asked quietly, half expecting an answer from the intelligent eyes watching him closely. But just then, a sharp shout interrupted their quiet exchange. a call from Dalton that echoed ominously through the barn, like thunder rolling across a stormy sky. "Stewart, you're wasting time!" The foreman stormed into view with an angry glare that seemed poised to slice through any lingering hope Jon held onto. Jon straightened up instinctively at Dalton's approach. There was no ignoring how quickly tension escalated when Dalton entered a room. "You think those horses are going to magically trust you because you pet them? They need proper handling or they'll never be worth anything!" His words dripped disdain as he advanced toward them. The cattle baron Ezekiel Thornton had given Jon a chance, but he knew maintaining that trust hinged heavily on how well things went moving forward, not just for him, but also for every animal under their care. "Why don't you try treating them like living beings instead of tools?" Jon shot back defiantly after taking a deep breath to steady himself against Dalton's intimidation tactics. Dalton laughed darkly, a sound devoid of humor, and took one step closer until Jon could almost feel heat radiating off him like flames licking at dry wood ready to ignite. "Because this is my ranch, and I'm running it how I see fit." Jon stood his ground, the wind biting at his cheeks and stinging his eyes as he faced Dalton Reed. The foreman's towering figure loomed before him, a wall of defiance that seemed unyielding as the frozen earth beneath their feet. "You really think these horses are going to magically trust you because you pet them?" Dalton scoffed, contempt dripping from every word. "They need proper handling or they'll never be worth anything." With each step Dalton took toward him, Jon could feel the heat radiating off the foreman's anger, like flames threatening to engulf everything in their path. Jon inhaled deeply, steadying himself against the pressure bearing down upon him, a storm brewing not only in the sky, but within this very moment. "Why don't you try treating them like living beings instead of tools?" Jon shot back defiantly, words spilling from him like water breaking through a dam. His heart pounded fiercely in his chest. It was now or never. Dalton's laughter echoed harshly across the pasture, a sound devoid of any real mirth, before he stepped closer until mere inches separated them. The foreman's breath was thick with tobacco and arrogance, igniting Jon's resolve even further. "Because this is my ranch, and I'm running it how I see fit." Each syllable was laced with authority that made others shrink away from confrontation. But Jon would not let fear dictate his choices any longer. He thought of the stallion, how its dark eyes had mirrored courage and desperation, and felt a surge of adrenaline rush through him like wildfire. "No," he said firmly, stepping forward and lifting his chin defiantly despite the sinking dread clawing at his insides. "These animals deserve better than what you're giving them." Dalton's face twisted into a sneer at Jon's boldness, disbelief flickering behind his eyes before morphing into outright fury. "You think you can come here and change things overnight? You have no idea what you're asking for." Jon held on to that sense of purpose tightening within him, the knowledge that if he didn't stand up for those horses now, who else would? The air crackled with tension as though an electric charge pulsed between them. "They're more than just stock," Jon pressed on passionately, as if each word were imbued with urgency. "They deserve kindness, not just when it's convenient for you, but every single day." The wind howled around them, whipping through their clothes while creating an atmosphere thick enough to cut with a knife. Jon could feel several sets of eyes watching. Ranch hands perched on their horses nearby, shifting uneasily in their saddles. But none dared intervene against Dalton's iron grip on authority. "You've got guts," Dalton admitted begrudgingly, after a tense silence stretched between them. It was almost begrudging respect, mixed alongside simmering disdain, simmering beneath surface layers of bravado. "But guts won't keep these horses alive when push comes to shove." "What about compassion?" The biting wind howled across the ranch as Jon stood his ground against Dalton Reed, who loomed like a storm cloud ready to unleash fury. The foreman's sneer was evident even through the swirling snowflakes, and Jon felt the weight of all eyes upon him, unsure ranch hands shifting nervously on their mounts, unwilling to choose sides. "Why don't you try treating them like living beings instead of tools?" Jon challenged, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. He could feel every heartbeat thundering in his ears, knowing that defiance could cost him everything. Dalton's laughter rang out harshly, devoid of mirth. "Because this is my ranch, and I'm running it how I see fit," he replied, inching closer until Jon could almost smell the sour tobacco lingering on his breath. The temperature seemed to drop further as tension thickened between them like ice on a pond about to crack. Jon's heart raced as he thought about the stallion they had rescued together. He couldn't let Dalton turn back now, not when there was so much at stake for every horse left on Broken Arrow Ranch. "They're more than just stock," he pressed passionately, each word spilling forth with urgency. "They deserve kindness, not just when it's convenient for you, but every single day." The cold wind bit into his cheeks as he spoke. It carried not only his words, but also an undercurrent of desperation. A few ranch hands exchanged uneasy glances, but remained silent, caught between loyalty and self-preservation under Dalton's oppressive rule. "You've got guts," Dalton admitted begrudgingly after a moment stretched long enough to make even the most hardened men flinch. Yet beneath that thin veneer of respect lay simmering contempt ready to boil over. "What about compassion?" Jon countered vehemently, refusing to back down any longer. He took a step forward, emboldened by both anger and hope. "Horses are not machines or simple tools meant solely for labor. They're partners. We can learn from them if we treat them right." Dalton's gaze narrowed dangerously at this perceived affront to his authority. "You think petting horses will magically make them trust you? That's naive." The scorn dripped from each syllable as he stepped even closer, invading Jon's space like a predator preparing for attack. "I believe it can foster understanding," Jon shot back fiercely before pausing to gather himself amidst the bluster coming from both men, a tempest brewing in both nature and their confrontation. Suddenly, a gust swept through the yard, carrying clumps of frozen earth and snowflakes spiraling into chaotic dance around them like miniature whirlwinds, celebrating discord among rivals locked in battle. "I'll tell you what you need," Dalton barked suddenly while advancing with purpose now. The warmth radiating off him felt unnatural against icy air enveloping everything else nearby, including Jon's resolve. The wind howled with a ferocity that rattled Jon's bones, swirling around him like an angry spirit intent on drowning out reason. He stood firm against Dalton's looming figure, heart pounding as he braced for the verbal assault that was sure to follow. The foreman glared down at him, eyes narrow and predatory. "You think just a few pats and kind words will solve all our problems?" Dalton sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. He stepped closer, invading Jon's personal space like an aggressive storm threatening to swallow him whole. "You honestly believe horses can be managed through mere compassion?" "I know they can," Jon shot back, his voice steady despite the chaos of emotions roiling within him. "They respond to kindness. It builds trust between us. If we treat them well, they'll work harder for us." Dalton let out a harsh laugh that echoed across the empty yard, sending chills down Jon's spine. "Trust? You think these animals are capable of something so human? They're tools for our use, nothing more." His tone was dismissive, but there was an undertone of doubt lurking beneath it. Jon squared his shoulders and stood tall against the biting wind. "They're living beings," he insisted passionately, each word laced with urgency, as if pleading for Dalton to see the truth before his very eyes. "They deserve more than just being treated like machinery." A tense silence enveloped them. Ranch hands sat uneasily upon their mounts nearby, their eyes flickering from Jon to Dalton as if caught in an unsettling game of fate. "Guts alone won't keep these horses alive when times get tough," Dalton barked sharply after a moment that felt stretched thin by tension. "What about compassion?" Jon pressed forward again, desperation bubbling beneath his surface as he fought to find common ground amidst the storm brewing between them. The gusts whipped past them with a howling intensity akin to nature itself rallying behind Jon's ideals, a tempest propelling both men into battle mode. Dalton raised an eyebrow mockingly before moving even closer now. The warmth radiating off him felt almost unnatural against the icy air surrounding everything else nearby, including Jon's resolve. "I'll tell you what you need," Dalton spat finally, stepping back slightly as though preparing some grand proclamation meant to dismantle every shred of hope Jon clung onto desperately. "What I need is for you to understand that I won't stand by while you throw away another horse just because it doesn't fit your idea of productivity," Jon retorted fiercely, the words escaping like arrows shot straight towards Dalton's chest, where they struck deep enough to make even hardened men feel vulnerable. The foreman's expression shifted slightly. Surprise flickered behind those cold eyes before something darker took hold. A simmering fury fueled by defiance lingering unspoken between them. A silent acknowledgement from one man who respected conviction even if he didn't agree with it entirely. The air was thick with tension, a palpable current crackling between Jon and Dalton as they stood their ground amidst the biting cold. The foreman's voice cut through the stillness like a jagged shard of ice. "What I need is for you to understand that I won't stand by while you throw away another horse just because it doesn't fit your idea of productivity." Jon's words burst forth, filled with fierce conviction. Each syllable struck at Dalton's hardened heart, igniting an unspoken challenge between them. A battle not just over a horse, but over values that ran deep. Dalton's brow furrowed momentarily. Surprise flickered behind his steely gaze before his simmering fury took over. He stepped closer, encroaching on Jon's space, radiating an unsettling warmth against the icy landscape around them. The wind whipped fiercely around them, swirling clumps of frozen earth and snowflakes into chaotic dances. The elements themselves seemed to celebrate their discord. "That's naive," Dalton scoffed derisively, each word dripping with contempt as he leaned in even closer. Jon could see how close they were now. An invisible line drawn between ideology and reality stretched taut like a bowstring ready to snap. "Fostering understanding takes time," Jon shot back, his voice steady despite the turmoil within him. He clenched his fists to stave off the chill creeping in from the outside world. His heart thundered as he tried to maintain focus against Dalton's aggressive stance. Suddenly, Dalton erupted once more, his next words ringing out like gunfire in the quiet winter landscape. "You're living in a dream. This isn't some fairy tale where horses suddenly become loyal out of pity." The scorn in his tone was unmistakable. He took a step back as if preparing for some grand proclamation meant to dismantle every shred of hope Jon clung onto desperately. Jon felt anger rise within him like steam billowing from boiling water, a rush so powerful it threatened to overflow all restraint. "I know what compassion can do. It saved that stallion, and it can save others too, if only someone would give them a chance." His voice echoed across the empty yard, resonating with raw emotion and defiance. For a fleeting moment, Dalton hesitated, perhaps considering what lay beneath those impassioned words, or maybe just feeling vulnerable under the weight of such conviction directed at him by this young man who dared challenge everything he believed about livestock management and loyalty. But that hesitation didn't last long. Anger reasserted itself almost immediately as Dalton opened his mouth once again, an impulsive urge bursting forth before reason could catch up with him. But this time he held back slightly when he saw Jon's unwavering stare bore into him like hot iron branding flesh. "I'll tell you what," Dalton said finally, after regaining composure, yet shifting uncomfortably beneath Jon's gaze. "You want trust? You want loyalty?" A cruel smile danced on his lips now, a predator reveling in its potential kill. "Prove it." The wind howled through the chaos of Broken Arrow Ranch, carrying with it a sense of dread and uncertainty. Jon stood at the center of an unfolding spectacle, surrounded by the powerful herd he had unwittingly drawn together. Each horse, proud and strong, formed a protective barrier around him, as if to shield him from the fury that was Dalton. Their presence filled him with strength, even as his heart raced at the foreman's impending retaliation. Dalton's face twisted in disbelief as he confronted Jon and his unexpected allies. The ranch hands scattered like startled birds, seeking refuge from the approaching storm of horses now descending upon them. But Jon remained rooted, eyes locked on Dalton's trembling figure. This was not just a test of loyalty, but a reckoning for all who had witnessed his defiance. "What are you going to do now?" Dalton challenged, desperation creeping into his voice as he realized the power shift taking place before him. His bravado faltered under the weight of reality. "You think these animals will save you? They're just beasts." Jon took a deep breath, steadying himself against the torrent of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Fear for what might happen next mingled with something else. Hope. "These beasts understand loyalty better than you ever will," he replied firmly, his voice unwavering despite Dalton's scornful gaze. "They chose to follow me." The stallion beside Jon snorted softly, its warm breath visible in the frigid air, a silent affirmation that reverberated between man and horse alike. Dalton's face paled further when Thornton stepped down from the porch, every inch exuding authority tempered by curiosity and concern. "What in blazes is happening here?" Thornton demanded, taking stock of both men and their surroundings with keen eyes that missed nothing. Jon seized this chance to speak up amidst the growing tension. "Sir," he began earnestly as he gestured toward the wild horses forming an undulating sea around them. "I saved one horse, this one right here, and in return, they rallied behind me." Thornton studied Jon closely before shifting his attention back toward Dalton, whose bravado continued to fade beneath mounting pressure from both sides, the gathered herd stirring restlessly at their backs while tension thickened like smoke hanging heavy over a fire. "Is this true?" Thornton asked Dalton sharply, his tone leaving no room for evasion or excuses. Dalton stammered, but found no words could undo what lay so clearly before them, a living testament rallying against years of neglect and cruelty borne out by those who failed to see value beyond productivity. "Mr. Thornton," Jon interjected again without hesitation, passion ignited within him, fueled by hope rather than fear, now coursing through every vein in his body, as conviction bubbled forth unabashedly between breaths stolen in anticipation of response from above or below. Who would prevail? The tension in the air was palpable, charged with a mix of uncertainty and anticipation. Jon stood his ground, unwavering as he faced Dalton, whose bravado began to wane under the scrutiny of both man and beast surrounding them. The assembled herd shifted restlessly behind Jon, their powerful forms casting an imposing shadow over the foreman. "Is this true?" Thornton's voice sliced through the thick atmosphere like a knife, directed squarely at Dalton. His tone was sharp and unyielding, demanding answers that could no longer be evaded. Dalton stammered, caught off guard by the ferocity of the situation. He struggled for words, but none came forth to undo what had become painfully evident. They were witnessing a movement born from compassion rally against years of neglect, a testament standing firmly before them. With determination igniting within him like wildfire, Jon stepped forward once more. "Mr. Thornton," he began with conviction ringing clear in his voice. It was as if all the fears that had once haunted him melted away beneath the weight of purpose surging through his heart. "This is not just about one horse or even this herd. It's about changing how we see these animals." Dalton's expression twisted into a mask of anger and disbelief at being challenged so openly on his own turf. The arrogance that usually fueled him faltered momentarily. Irritation creased his brow as he glanced around at the horses who seemed to watch intently, their silent support undeniable. Jon pressed on, passion fueling every word that slipped past his lips. They are not mere tools for our labor. They are living beings deserving respect and kindness. He gestured toward the stallion beside him, its dark coat gleaming even in the faint light, and then scanned across the crowd of horses gathered around them like guardians ready to defend their own. You saw how this stallion led others here. He didn't gather them out of fear or desperation, but perhaps something deeper, a longing for partnership forged in loyalty. A low murmur rippled through those present as ranchers exchanged glances, considering everything Jon laid bare before them. It struck a chord that resonated with many who had spent too long viewing livestock merely as assets rather than companions. Dalton bristled at being contradicted publicly and sought to regain control over the narrative spiraling beyond his grasp. "You're talking nonsense!" he spat defensively while taking a step back from Jon's unwavering gaze. Yet there was something shifting within those watching. The murmurs grew louder still as empathy blossomed among men hardened by years on unforgiving land. "Look around you," Thornton interjected sharply again as he took measured steps toward Jon and turned slowly to face both foreman and herd alike. These animals have traveled far under harsh conditions when they could have stayed safe where they belonged, to follow your path. Instead, Jon stood at the center of the ranch yard, surrounded by the chaos of both men and horses. The storm had passed, leaving a clear blue sky overhead, but his heart raced with uncertainty. In the midst of tumultuous emotions, he could feel the weight of the gathered herd behind him, an unyielding force that had come to symbolize something greater than himself. The stallion, once on the brink of death, now stood proudly at his side. Its dark coat glistened in the sunlight like polished ebony, radiating vitality and strength. Jon could almost hear its heartbeat synchronizing with his own, a pulse that resonated with determination and trust. With each breath he took, he felt emboldened by the silent promise shared between them. "Look around you," Thornton's voice echoed across the ranch yard as he addressed both Jon and Dalton. His gaze swept over the mass of horses gathered in quiet solidarity behind Jon. Dalton scowled. He was cornered as his bravado waned beneath Thornton's scrutiny. "You're talking nonsense!" The foreman's voice cracked as desperation seeped into his words. But there was an undeniable shift among those present. Hardened ranchers who'd spent years working livestock began to murmur amongst themselves. It was clear that empathy was starting to blossom within their hearts like wildflowers breaking through snow-dusted ground after winter's grip. "You think they don't know what loyalty means?" Jon stepped forward, feeling adrenaline surge through him with every word. "They are not just tools for profit or labor. They are companions who understand kindness." He looked directly into Dalton's eyes, unflinching despite their depths filled with rage and disbelief. "What would it take for you to see it?" Jon continued passionately while gesturing toward the herd encircling him like guardians ready to protect all that mattered most, the bond forged between man and horse that transcended any mere transaction or exchange. As Thornton surveyed them all, the stallion so resolute beside Jon, as if it understood this moment held more significance than any they'd encountered before, he began to grasp what everyone else sensed. Compassion had ignited a fire within these beings, a fire strong enough to unite them against neglectful treatment rooted deep in tradition. A flicker of hope sparked in Thornton's eyes as he turned back towards Jon. "Mr. Stewart," he began, slowly but firmly, "I owe you an apology, and perhaps much more than that." Before Dalton could interject again, Thornton raised a hand sharply, silencing him with authority shaped by years spent running a successful ranch, one built on principles soon unraveling beneath glaring truths exposed today. "I want you to take charge here," Thornton proclaimed finally, after pausing long enough for everyone to absorb this unexpected turnabout. a shift capable of redefining how they viewed their roles within this rugged landscape crafted from toil and sweat over generations past.